speak in some ways this Methodist turmoil about our polity, our understanding of homosexuality, and how we live together as one church. Now, last time I looked, the Bible does not have any specific verses about the United Methodist Book of Discipline. So I had to think, what does our scripture say about how we are related to one another, even in the midst of conflict? And the most powerful image for me was that image of Jesus saying, I am the vine and you are the branches, and this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So Nancy is here to read that lesson this morning for us.
And that lesson is from John 15, 5 through 14. I am the vine and you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Amen. Thank you, Nancy. So friends, why don't we join together in prayer? Gracious God, we ask you to speak to us now, to fill us with the information we need and also the grace we need for transformation, so that we can truly be people who are branches connected to our vine and connected to each other, so that we can love one another as Jesus loves us. Speak to us through the words of my mouth and through the prayers of all of our hearts, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So this will be at least the majority of the sermon will be content heavy. I've got some slides. I've titled it kind of pompously, a summary of polity regarding homosexuality in the United Methodist Church. So this morning we're not getting into as much how we individually feel about the subject, but how the denomination has wrestled with this. And as I began to mention last week, I'll just say again, as a country and as a denomination, we have been wrestling with this for so long that the tenor of the conversation has gone through many iterations and has shifted quite a bit, even in the last 10 years. And so the language that we used to use sometimes now sounds inappropriate. So sometimes there's just no good word for things. For example, the word issue. For many of us, this is an issue that we need to figure out. For some of us, this is not an issue, this is our life, or the life of somebody that we love. This is not a hot button topic, this is our identity. So even that word is not always helpful. There are sides to this debate, and it's hard to know what word to use to describe the sides. We seem to have settled on progressives and traditionalists. Those might not be perfect words, but those are the ones we have. Even the word homosexuality now, I feel, is more charged than it used to be. And so that might represent a certain way of thinking or a certain group. Other people might use LGBTQIA+. So we do want to be open to all. I do have to use some words. And so please know that when I use some words, I know that I'm using words that are leaving people out, and I hate that. But we'll just do our best. So let's just define some of our Methodist-y terms here. The first thing you need to know about is the Book of Discipline. The Book of Discipline is our rule book for our denomination, and it is a worldwide book. It applies to us just as it applies to a congregation in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, or in the Congo, or in Germany, or Florida, or wherever you happen to be and you see a cross and flame. They are accountable to the same book. It also contains the social principles, which are not binding. This is not a binding part of our rule book. This is statements on all kinds of social issues that Methodists have deliberated on and taken a stand, or we have a certain belief. So you'll find the social principles in our discipline. They range from everything to our response to war, to abortion, to the solar system, believe it or not, environmental care, everything you might want to know. What does your church say about such and such? You can find it in the social principles. Some of the worst advice I ever got was from a district superintendent who told me in my first appointment, "Oh, you could do a Bible study on the social principles." That was a good idea. It's all the hot button issues. There were 5 people in the class. 4 people left the church before the class was over. So never again. The Book of Discipline changes every 4 years, but only by general conference action. There it is in all its glory. Obviously, we have to have discipline. Disciple, the word disciple at its root is discipline. We are disciplining ourselves to walk with Christ, to follow him. So we joke, but the Book of Discipline is not a bad thing. It would be chaos without it. So we need it, and yet it becomes what we fight over. So the next term you'll need to know are bishops. We do have bishops in the United Methodist Church. We are a very flat organization. So we have basically 3 levels of administration in the denomination. There are elders and deacons. I'm an elder. So those are the clergy out there in the local churches every week. We have district superintendents who oversee about 50 or 60 local churches. They make up the cabinet. We have 6 or 5, we just downsized over the summer here in Washington. And then we have a bishop who oversees an area. Dean, would you grab me a glass of water, please? Thank you. So next slide is our lovely bishops. There they are in all their glory. And I joke, but that's a picture we can be proud of because it's a worldwide picture. So there are people from I don't know how many backgrounds, speak how many languages, men and women, retired bishops and active bishops. If you're a bishop, you are always part of the Council of Bishops, even if you're retired. And they cannot make legislation. So they rule with voice but no vote. They can't I don't think they can propose legislation even. So voice but no vote. They do gather several times a year and they make statements about, especially in the United States, when something happens, a natural disaster or a crisis at the border, they'll respond to it, but they cannot make legislation. So the next thing you need to know about is General Conference. This is the body that can make policy for our denomination. General Conference happens every 4 years. We might remember in 2016, it happened right here in Portland. It does rotate around the United States, and I think they have one scheduled for the Philippines in 4 or 8 years or something. The General Conference is made up of delegates that come from every annual conference. Every annual conference elects lay delegates and clergy delegates. Thank you. And it is based on church membership. So here in the Pacific Northwest, we have a relatively low membership compared to most of the rest of the church. So from Washington and northern Idaho, we get to elect 1 layperson and 1 clergy person to represent all of us. By comparison, in West Virginia, where I served before this, they get to elect 5 clergy people and 5 lay people. So there's some frustration there, of course. But here's a picture of General Conference in Portland, 2016. You can see that black curtain there down at the bottom part of that picture. Everything in front of that is the bar of the annual conference. So those folks sitting around round tables, they are the delegates. It is a 2-week conference. It is very difficult. There is a lot of legislation to read. And so there were about 3,000 people there. In Portland. It's real hard to see, but you can see on the right side of that picture, on a white table, there's a row of chalices all lined up, ready to have communion. So we come together, we worship. I was there. I didn't take this picture, but I sat pretty close to that area, and it was very tense. It was difficult because everybody knew we were at a big place. So let's see, what's the next slide, Jim? So let's just take a little history lesson and how we got to where we are today. So this is kind of a chronology of what happened when. And for some of us, we might see this process as a way of people kind of defending the faith, trying to do what is right. For some of us, it might be difficult to hear this chronology, where we see the church trying to be more exclusive or shut themselves off from people that we know and love. And maybe you're somewhere in the middle. So you might remember in 1968, the Methodist Church and the Evangelical United Brethren combined to make the United Methodist Church. In 1968, we had a whole new book of discipline, a whole new way of being together. We became the largest Protestant denomination in the country. We started losing members immediately after. So that was 1968. The very next General Conference year, we have a rule or a sentence, some language about homosexuality. Now, this showed up in the social principles. Remember, this is not binding. This is just kind of the statement of what we think about social issues, but we're not going to hold any member or any clergy person to this. So this is the official sentence in 1972. We do not condone the practice of homosexuality and consider it incompatible with Christian teaching. That is still our official policy, incompatible with Christian teaching. We do not recommend marriage between two persons of the same sex. Now that sounds decisive, but also gentle. We just don't recommend it. If you'll go to the next one, 1984, now language becomes binding. It is added to the rules for clergy. This is now a chargeable offense, which means if a clergy person is found in violation of this rule, they can be brought up on charges and defrocked, loss of credentials. Self-avowed practicing homosexuals are not to be accepted as candidates, ordained as ministers, or appointed to serve in the United Methodist Church. If we continue on, 1988, so the very next General Conference year, added to the social principles, again, not binding, but still important. We affirm that God's grace is available to all. We commit ourselves to be in ministry for and with all persons. So Jim, if you can go back to the previous one. Sorry, I threw you for a loop there. If you go back to yeah, that's perfect, yeah. So here we say self-avowed practicing homosexuals are not to be accepted as ministers. And the next time we come together, we say, but we're going to be in ministry for and with all people. Do you see the Methodist tension here? We are trying to be people of grace and love. We have this belief. We disagree about it. It says that some people we just cannot accept in certain ways, and yet we want to accept and love all people. The Methodist way here, for better or for worse. If you'll continue on. So in 1996, this is when I personally began to have some personal history in this discussion. Added language banning United Methodist clergy and United Methodist churches from performing or hosting homosexual unions. Because while we're fighting about this, the rest of the society is kind of moving forward. And gay people are saying, we have a right to join together with the person we love. And so unions begin to happen in our country in public. And many of those people are faithful United Methodists. And they have celebrated the weddings of many of their friends, and they would like their church friends to come and celebrate with them also. So now we have even more tension. If you can continue on. So in 2000, in the Book of Discipline, we added, we implore families and churches not to reject or condemn their lesbian and gay members and friends. Again, this seesaw back and forth. One year we say, you cannot celebrate your union in the church. Even if we don't call it a wedding, you can't do it. But please don't reject those people that we've just said cannot be in the church in this way. We're just trying to do the impossible here, right? 2008, I mean, at this point, everyone is so entrenched that things are starting to just get a little nitty-gritty now. 2008 approved a resolution to oppose homophobia and heterosexism. So, we're encouraging people not to react with anger to people who are different than you. But in 2012, and I do remember this well, this was in Tampa, Florida, there was language stating that Christians disagree about homosexuality, and that could not get approved. Even though that is fact. We do not agree about homosexuality, but that could not pass a vote at General Conference. So where are we today? So you might remember, if you were here 2 years ago, some of us went to General Conference. I went for several days, and everything was at a standstill. It was very tense. I volunteered and helped register people, and I remember one interchange I had with a man from South Carolina. He happened to be in the wrong line. His name started with a different letter, and I didn't have his thing, and he got very snippy with me, and it just was difficult. There was a lot of protesting happening at General Conference, and this picture is particularly painful for me to see. I don't know the man on the floor, but he clearly feels torment. And so he's enacting being bound. And you can see the veins in his neck. This is deeply painful. The man behind him to the left in the black jacket, next to the guy in the red, the guy in the black jacket is Frank Schaefer. He was the United Methodist elder. His son is gay and came out, and they knew that a long time, and he asked his dad to perform his wedding in Pennsylvania, and his father said yes. And then there was a big church trial, and he was defrocked for that. So, and then the bishop in Southern California hired him to be a campus pastor at UC Santa Barbara, I think. Anyway, and then there's this woman walking by in that picture wearing a purple outfit with Methodist cross and flames on it. Do you see that? This is an assumption, but I'm guessing she's either from the Philippines or from an African country where to be United Methodist is such an important thing. They have fabric and clothing that denotes it. And she's walking by. So that picture to me sums up General Conference 2016. You can go to that next slide. So what happened at General Conference was there were like 58 pieces of legislation that dealt with homosexuality. It was clearly the only thing that we were going to do for 2 weeks. And it came to a head the second week of the conference. There were rumors flying around that the bishops had a plan to divide the denomination. And the rumors became so intense that the bishops had to address it on the floor. And they said, we do not have a plan. We actually don't have enough trust among us as bishops to come up with such a cohesive plan. And so this moment happened. I don't know who the man at the microphone is. Who? Oh, Mike Slaughter. Oh, he's a big deal. I should probably know him. Mike Slaughter is a pastor of a big church in Ohio. Yeah. And has done a lot of work on this. But behind him is Adam Hamilton, who I do know, in the black suit. Adam Hamilton is the pastor of the biggest church in our denomination, and we've read many of his books here. We know Adam Hamilton. In many ways, he is the most powerful United Methodist, has a lot of credibility and just solid leadership. And he came to the microphone after Mike Slaughter, and he said, bishops, we implore you to lead us. We are in a kairos moment, which means this is almost a holy moment. It is terrible, and yet we know God is with us, and we have to do something else. And so when we come together for General Conference, everything is Robert's Rules of Order. Could you go back before that picture? I think there was something else I wanted to say. So he made a resolution to have the bishops do something. So the bishops excused themselves from General Conference, first time it's ever happened, and they met. While the rest of the denomination is meeting, they're off in a room meeting also. And they came back the next day and said, now this sounds very Methodist, we'd like to form a committee. But I was in the room, it felt different, okay? It felt like this is gonna be a new thing. And they established this thing called the Commission on the Way Forward, where we would call a special General Conference in 2019, not wait for 2020, but we would have a special General Conference, and this Commission on a Way Forward would be tasked with coming up with some legislation for us to vote on, not so that we'll all agree about homosexuality, but so that we can figure out how to be a church in the midst of this and stop fighting so much every year. So they formed this Commission on a Way Forward, 32 members made up of bishops, clergy, and laity. I think like 3 bishops and then an even number of clergy and lay. There were 3 members of the LGBT community, I think, and it's a worldwide commission. They have been meeting every few months. I mean, a worldwide commission meeting every few months. The money that this involves is staggering to me. And they have made 3 recommendations to the Council of Bishops. So they've got 3 plans, a traditional plan, the one church plan, and a multi-branch plan. So let's explain these. This is important because this is what we're going to vote on in February. So the traditionalist plan would maintain current discipline language, which is, you'll remember, homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. It would retain all the current laws. Clergy cannot be gay. We cannot perform gay marriages in our churches. The change here is that this would be established church law, and we would be required to be accountable to it. So what's been happening right now since 2016 is just kind of chaos might be too loaded a word, but we're in this limbo zone. So right now, there aren't any trials happening that I'm aware of. It's just kind of like a holding pattern. But if the traditionalist plan were voted, that would be it. And we would see a lot of trials and defrocking. It would be incredibly messy, and I think would lead to a split almost immediately. The next plan is the one church plan. This is the one that the bishops received all 3 of these plans from the Commission on the Way Forward, and they said, this is the one we are going to recommend to the General Conference. So let's pay attention to this one. This would remove the exclusive language in the discipline. It would remove all language regarding homosexuality. Every annual conference, which is for us all of Washington and northern Idaho, every annual conference would vote on its own ordination standards. Every local church and pastor would make their own decision about gay marriage. And then we would remain the United Methodist Church in every way. So we would still have a book of discipline that is global, that we're all accountable to, but we would just remove this issue from it altogether. We'd still have our bishops, all our general agencies, our missions, our disaster responses, our denominational structure, which provides a lot of financial support for every local church in some way. But every church would have to make a decision. That's you and me. And the decision could be, we don't want to decide. But we've made that decision for a long time. So the multi-branch plan, this is where the church would kind of more formally divide into 3 branches. There would be a progressive branch, a contextual branch, and a traditional branch. An annual conference would decide which branch to join. They would maintain the Council of Bishops. To be honest, this branch is extremely confusing, and nobody I have talked to has any idea what this plan really means. I'm not sure it's a well thought out plan. It might be a plan where they needed a 3rd plan to present. So I'm not sure how that would work, and it's not being entertained seriously. So the one branch plan is what the delegates are going to be voting on in February. So if you could go to the next slide. So that's kind of all the information. That is where we are. And that's where we can stop speaking definitively about, about this. We've kind of run out of facts here. So in February 2019, the end of February, all the delegates that met in 2016 in Portland, they will go to St. Louis, and we have to use Robert's Rules of Order. So it's not like the bishops are going to stand up and say, okay, we've got two plans, let's vote for plan A or plan B, and we're not doing anything we've done before, we're just going to choose this. That's not the way it works. So you have to vote something in or everything stays the same. So my question is, what happens if they vote it down? Now, I will say, I got to talk to our lay delegate to General Conference at our annual conference meeting in June, and I was impressed with her response. From what she said and from the thinking I've done, it seems like we have to kind of be people of good faith in this and remember that we are all people of faith, that we all love God. We're trying our best to love God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so I am trying to trust that the delegates to General Conference in 2019 are going with the intention to let God do a new thing and to look with an open heart at ways that we can go forward together. I don't think it's going to serve us to slip into cynicism and say, oh, nothing's going to happen, they're all going to vote the way they've always voted, it's all a mess. I'm always tempted to go that road, but I think that this is a Kairos moment. From being there in 2016, nobody was happy. Nobody in that room was happy. We all know we need to go in a different way. And so, will it be the one church plan? I don't know. Honestly, I do think the votes are going to be very tight. But what is our option? So another question is, will they be able to vote on any other legislation? I'm not 100% sure about that answer. I think that the Judicial Council, which is like our version of the Supreme Court, ruled a couple months ago that they would be able to vote on other legislation if it is in the spirit of the Commission on the Way Forward. So define that. I'm not sure what that means. But I think it does mean there's an opening to voting on other plans. Let's see, what's the next slide, Jim? I will say that in the last 4 years, there's been a new group formed called the Wesleyan Covenant Association. They are a traditionalist group, and they are gathering members who are paying dues. And to many, this feels like the beginning of a new denomination. And so one of the questions all along the way has been, who's going to leave? Everybody wants to retain the church, the name, the money, the land. So the question about who will leave is a big one. The WCA, the Wesleyan Covenant Association, seems to be positioning to leave. I don't know. So just a little historical context. This has happened before, but way before our institutional memory. So the United Methodist Church did split. It was not United. It was the Methodist Episcopal Church then split in 1844 over the issue of slavery. You can imagine what the country was like at that time, just kind of on the verge of a civil war, and the church decided it could not stay together. It did reunify in 1939, just a mere 95 years later. It took them to work out those differences. But when it reunified, it was segregated. So all the African American churches were put into their own general conference, and they did not come and meet with the rest of the Methodist churches. That changed in 1968 when we merged with the EUBs, Evangelical United Brethren. Another big change that really did not generate this level of turmoil was when General Conference granted women's ordination in 1956. So, so you can go to the next slide here. So really, like, what does this mean for us? You know, what does faithfulness look like in the midst of irreconcilable conflict? I can't remember ever giving a sermon where I ended with, I don't know. I don't know, beats me, The purpose of sermons is to declare what we can know, what we do believe, what you can come and invest your life in, because this is good and true. And so I am in a bit of turmoil because I just don't know. I am split. I'm a good Methodist. I'm split on the fence. I think about 49% of me thinks this is irreconcilable. And maybe the healthiest thing to do is to divide and stop fighting with each other. I think I mainly am probably like most people, we just want the fight to be over. It is all-consuming. It is embarrassing. It is stunting. When folks come to me, what am I supposed to tell them about our church? What do we believe? I mean, we as a local church, that is important. We as a denomination, that is important. In the last 2 years, I've had 4 gay couples contact me privately and ask if our church is open to families like theirs. And I've had to be very honest and say, many of us are, but we have not had a discussion about it, and we have no formal policy. This is what you will hear from me, from our leadership. I don't think we'll ever try to make you feel uncomfortable, but we have not had that discussion. And all 4 couples have said, we can't. We have had too many years of hiding, and we have to go someplace where we know we will be accepted, and we know that our children are not going to hear something damaging in Sunday school. So being in limbo hurts us as a church, because what do we say to people who want to know if they can come and be a part of us? So part of me just, yes, let's get this over with and get on with it. But the other part of me thinks the easiest thing is maybe not always the godly thing that Jesus would want us to do. Especially in times that are so divisive, like where we are now, where we let social issues just drive us apart. Doesn't it seem like a powerful witness that United Methodists are so committed to loving one another that we have stayed together this long? I'm trying to spin this in a positive way, but I do believe this. All the other mainline denominations they're done and dusted. The United Church of Christ, the Episcopal Church, the Presbyterian Church, even the Baptists. They have made a decision, and they're entering a new world. We Methodists have just strung it out. And I think that is because we are committed to loving one another. And maybe I'm just super naive, but I think that's a powerful witness, that when the whole world is saying, that person is so different than you, you can just write them off, we are saying, no, they're not. Jesus calls me to be in a relationship with them. But maybe it would be a lot easier if we split. I don't know. So I can't end a sermon on an I don't know. So here is the thing that I do know. I have to look up and remember what the thing I know is. The thing I know is that Jesus says, I am the vine, and you are the branches. And apart from me, you can do nothing. There's no greater love than this, to give your life for your friends. So do this. This is what I'm telling you to do. Love one another as I have loved you. Now, maybe the best thing to do is to divide. Maybe we will divide the denomination. And maybe that is right in this hour and in this time, in this realm, with all that we know, maybe that is the course forward. Maybe we'll divide. But we won't divide Christ. We will not divide Christ. He says, everything on earth, everything in heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. And so Christ is eternal. He is the vine, and we are the branches, and we have to be connected to him. We'll be connected to him. Our brothers and sisters who disagree with us will be connected to him as well. And so we will be connected to each other. Even if we decide at General Conference we can't be part of the same institution, we will still be connected with each other. Traditionalists will be connected with gay families and everyone in between. And we someday will feast at his heavenly banquet, and we will all be there. And that gives me hope. Thanks be to God. Friends, why don't we pray together? We'll invite our